All right, we're on page 143. And we'll be starting on the third paragraph, page 143. And just to refresh your memory, we were analyzing a contradiction that's in the book of Proverbs. And, right, so they're sort of kvetching about Proverbs. They were kvetching about Kohelet for a while, Ecclesiastes. Now they're wondering why Proverbs is in the Torah, because they found contradictions in it. And without going into the detail, they're analyzing the statement. They're analyzing this concept. Are you supposed to answer a fool in that fool's foolishness? So a fool says something to you stupid. Do you respond? Do you try to talk them out of it? Or not? And Proverbs seems to have it both ways. You do and you don't. So that's the contradiction. So what they find is it's under different circumstances. So they say for worldly matters, you're not supposed to respond at all. And if you remember, they give two weird examples, where a guy actually questions, he claims he's having an affair with the other guy's wife. So in the end, the guy doesn't argue with him. That's sort of foolishness. It's unbelievable. So he just doesn't even argue with him, although luckily he dies anyway, the person who makes the accusation. I think the idea is you don't have to bother. You don't have to bother to answer a fool in their utter foolishness, because somewhere along the line, their foolishness is going to overtake them and they will be punished. So you don't really have to be the one. Or another example is a guy comes and says that, I'm your father. Your father's not your father. I had an affair with your mother. I'm actually your father, which is malicious. They give it a malicious example, but also foolishness. So don't even respond. That's what the Talmud says. So don't even respond, because ultimately God will take care of that. You don't have to respond to such nonsense. Okay. So that's the example of when you don't have to respond to nonsense. Now they give examples of when you do have to respond. So that's where we are right now. Okay. So we're in the third paragraph, 143. B'divrei Torah, mahi. So in B'divrei Torah, when it comes to matter of Torah, that's important enough that you have to respond to every silly objection. You do, because Torah, is that's our life, that's our world, and we have to defend it from any kind of silly objections. Okay, that's hard for teachers. It would be better if we didn't have to respond at all to people's questions or people's objections. But they're saying for Torah, you do have to respond. And now here's the example. B'divrei Torah mahi. So when it comes to Torah, give me an example. Ki hadiyatev Rabban Gamliel v'kadaresh. So Rabban Gamliel was teaching, right? And he was making a midrash. So he was examining a verse, and he was making this claim in examining the verse. So let me just say that Darish means he was making a homiletical interpretation of the verse, probably not a literal interpretation of the verse, but a homiletical interpretation of the verse. And here's what he says: Atida isha sheteled b'chol yom. So in the future, a woman will be able to give birth one day and then the next. So no 9 months, none of the waiting. The woman gives birth, the next day she gives birth again. And shin ne'emar. And he's quoting a verse. The verse seems to imply something messianic, something supernatural in the future world. So shenemar, hara violetet yachdav. So it's a quote from Jeremiah, pointing, at least how he's interpreting this, pointing to the messianic world, the future world, where a woman will conceive and give birth almost simultaneously. But let's say in the same day. Which I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert, but it doesn't happen that way nowadays. It's not, and it's not likely it's going to happen that way soon. Although with genetic engineering, you never know. But so Rabban Gamliel is reading the verse as predicting that will happen one day, and predicting Jeremiah saying in the end times, in the times of the Messiah, this will be a miracle that will happen. Okay, now does Rabban Gamliel really mean that that's going to happen soon? Does he really believe scientifically that it could happen? I'm sure he doesn't. We don't even know really exactly what he's trying to say, other than things will be very different when the Messiah comes. Okay. So a student now interrupts him. So he's giving this lecture to the rabbis. A student interrupts him. Ligleg alav oto talmid. A certain student made fun of him. Ligleg, mocked him. How can you possibly mean that a woman can conceive and give birth on the same day? Amar ein kol chadash tachat hashemesh. So in making fun of him, he doesn't just appeal from science, because that's obvious. All right, obviously scientifically this can't happen. But he also quotes a verse. It's a verse from Ecclesiastes, which we've been talking about, not coincidentally. It's a verse we've been talking about, Ein kol chadash tachat hashemesh. There is nothing new under the sun, which, by the way, the rabbis do interpret as saying supernatural things don't happen. Don't expect a world where God overturns the natural order, because that doesn't happen. Ein kol chadash tachat hashemesh means the world that we have it, the natural world that we have it, is the world that we're stuck with. God isn't going to create something new. I will say also, later rabbis interpret this as meaning you shouldn't try. I mean, you shouldn't try to bring about a miracle. You know, when they discuss the golem story, you know, and the possibility of making a human being, one of the objections to that effort is Ein kol chadash tachat hashemesh. We can't make things new that God didn't make. We've got God's beautiful world, and we're not in the business of making new things. And God isn't going to make a new world for us. We've got this world here. And there are rabbis that bring this up in issues of genetic engineering and back, you know, in Talmudic times, because it's not a new science, and also today. And goes, so this is his objection. You're telling me there's going to be a woman that can get pregnant and give birth in the same day? It's not going to happen because God's made the world the way it is now. Yeah.
But weren't these people who took literally what they read in the Bible? And, you know, Sarah had a baby, and I'm surprised they say that.
Yeah, so it's
many things in the Bible that if you take them literally.
Yeah, so it's a good question. You have miracles in the Bible. You have the sun standing still. You have Jonah swallowed by a whale. So they look at the Bible as being an exception to that. You know, the Bible is the formative periods of the Jewish faith, but they said don't expect it to happen now. So it's not like they didn't believe those stories, but that becomes an important theology. Don't expect a miracle. You know, and God's not going to change the force of nature for you. God made a world for us. Yeah.
I think one of the things that is meaningful to me is that the world is understandable, and as time goes by, we might understand more and more of it because there are rules. Right. It's not magic. It's not something that you can never figure out. There's a reliable thing that you can count on that happens.
So I want to point out, though, that the rabbis are giving this as an example of a foolish objection. Although for us it doesn't sound so foolish. The guy's just saying, look, we already learned that this stuff doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. So why is it a foolish objection?
Oh, I think it is foolish because, I mean, if you just think about the time it takes stuff to happen, I can't conceive of it ever.
Oh no! What you're saying is that the example of a woman conceiving and giving birth in the same day, that's foolish. But the Talmud is saying the objection is foolish.
Oh.
So the objection's foolish because the student is taking it literally. Right. And Rabbi Gamliel, I'm assuming here, probably doesn't mean it literally, or he's talking about the end times where all bets are off anyway.
Right.
You know, he's anything about it. Right. He's looking to the messianic time when the dead will come alive, and he's not saying like, look, this is going to happen tomorrow.
And then I think, as far as the other goes, there are lots of allegories.
Yeah.
And there are lots of exaggeration, like. You'll never see me do this in a million years. Well, I'm not going to be here a million years from now. And if I'm talking to you, you know I don't really mean a million years.
And you get annoyed. You get annoyed that I have to explain, no, I didn't mean I really didn't mean a million years. Yeah. Right. So the Talmud is saying, in normal conversation, you don't even have to answer it as a stupid objection, but this is Torah. Right. So Rabbi Gamliel feels like he's forced to. The Talmud is saying you do have to respond. And anyway, it's interesting. What's a foolish objection? What's not? These are so anyway. So Rabbi Gamliel then responds. Remember the other rabbis when it came to the accusations of infidelity decide you don't even have to respond to that. But here Rabbi Gamliel says I have to respond because this is Torah. Amarle, bo'ar eka dugma tamba olam hazeh. So Rabbi Gamliel says, I will show you an example, something similar that happens nowadays. In other words, what I'm predicting, or what Jeremiah is predicting, according to his interpretation, is not so far off the charts in terms of nature that it doesn't exist in some form today. And I'll show you that example. Nifach ach ve'le tarnagolet. They went outside. Luckily, there was a chicken there. Showed him a chicken. Look, the chicken gives birth every day. The chicken conceives and gives birth in the same day. So we're not talking about God totally upending the laws of nature. God will just tweak things a bit, and the human species will become more like a chicken in the future days.
However, the egg is not a baby chick.
Yes. Well, there's all sorts of things wrong with this. Also, the human female is not a chicken either. But But so I mean, it's a cute story. So it's a cute story. The moral of the story is that you do answer a fool in his foolishness in the world of Torah. So the question is, why doesn't he go deeper? He could say something like, "Look, I mean this allegorically, metaphorically, and let's try to examine my metaphor." But once the guy sort of gives way or gives up the idea that he's not taking it metaphorically.
Right.
He's stuck at that literal basis. So all Rabban Gamliel can do at that point is respond at the literal level and hope that he grows enough, that he could later understand deeper levels of meaning. Maybe. Right. Yeah. Anyway, take the time to respond. I guess what we're learning here also is, I'm just thinking on my feet here, is that he responds kind of where the guy's at.
Right.
You're giving me you're giving me a scientific objection, so I'm going to answer you in the realm of science. Look, it can happen with chickens. If it can happen with chickens, you can imagine maybe it could happen with human beings. By the way, in our day and age, it's not as fanciful as it probably was back then either, where we could really certainly imagine, forms of genetic engineering, science fiction, where you could really accelerate the process of pregnancy. I mean, I couldn't explain it to you, but we could certainly imagine that. So for Rabban Gamliel saying, look, we have an example in the world, and you're giving me an objection from science, I'm going to respond, from science, because that's where the student's at. And in the world of Torah, that's what you do.
But they do.
So maybe it's not even characterizing the question here as foolish. He's responding where the student's at, and that's of value.
They do that today in the laboratory with stem cells.
Right.
Yeah, exactly that point.
Right. I mean, 200 years from now, they'll be doing things we can't imagine. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, isn't this like in Passover, the way the 4 children and how you
Respond to each one.
Right.
Right.
Their mode.
Right. Okay. I will say the Talmud is judgmental here. The Talmud is judgmental. Rabban Gamliel doesn't say, like, you idiot. Don't you understand when I'm speaking metaphorically? So he doesn't say that. Even the Rabban Gamliel was someone who spoke his mind. We know that about him, but he doesn't say that. The narrator of the Talmud is giving this as an example of foolishness. But you never hear Rabban Gamliel say, that's a foolish question. That's interesting.
Right, because that's how to turn a student off.
Right. Yeah.
But isn't it also somewhat of a setting up to show how a class, if you will, should be run?
Right.
And then the professor, in this case the rabbi, shouldn't have to waste his time.
Right. I even like that he takes him outside. Takes him on a field trip. Look, there's a chicken. He doesn't just say chicken. He takes him outside. Shows him the chicken. Okay. That's not available to us right now. The chicken's not, but anyway.
God does the same thing with Job. He
takes him outside, shows him things.
The universe that I created. Where were you when I was creating?
All right, another example. V'tu yativ Rabban Gamliel, v'kadarish. So he was also explicating this verse, with this idea. Atida Eretz Yisrael, shetotzi gluskaot uchli melat. So in the future, the land of Israel will grow. Will give out baked cakes. Cakes that are already baked. And also garments that are already woven. You'll be able to pick those things off the ground. So that in the future, Shene'emar, because he's, again, he quotes a prophetic text, which seems to be predicting a messianic future world. Yehipsat bar haaretz, that cakes will come out from the ground. Baked cakes will come out from the ground. So again, Rabban Gamliel is obviously referring to some miraculous future that will come when the Messiah comes. But we don't know whether it's the same student, although it's a similar pattern. Liglev alavoto tamid. So again, the student makes fun of him. So it's interesting that ligleg is important too. So it makes fun. So the student makes fun of him. Ligleg alavoto tamid, the Amar, and says, Ein kol chadash tachat hashemesh. Exactly the same quote. Hey, you're predicting here something that's supernatural, but we've learned that the supernatural things are not going to happen because there's nothing new under the sun. There will not be anything new under the sun. Nefach ach velek mihon. So he took him outside. Again, so he answers, although he may think of this as a foolish question, doesn't characterize it as a foolish question, instead takes him outside, and he shows him something like what he's predicting, which was petriot, so big mushrooms that look like This you have to look at the Rashi here, but also the commentary you've got in our edition. So these big mushrooms that apparently looked like loaves of bread, they would come out of the ground looking like loaves of bread. And what's interesting is too, probably enough for a full meal. Even probably nutritionally, enough for a full meal. So this is what I'm talking about. You got something like this already. So it's not a big change in nature. It's a little tweak in nature. And it would be like a loaf of bread. And also, and I like this too, the aklimelet navra barkura. And also he shows some big palm branches. Big palm branches are almost like a fully woven set of clothes. After all, what does God give to Adam and Eve?
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't give Adam and Eve a sweater. He gives them palm branches, so they can cover themselves. Because like a palm branch is already almost like a fully woven piece of clothing. So Rabbi Gamliel says this is the example. There is an example like it. Okay, he doesn't dismiss the student. He doesn't say it's a stupid question. That's important because it leads us to the next discussion, which is a famous discussion, 144. Yes.
So even though the student is mocking the teacher
Right.
is
Right.
okay.
Right. That's important. Yeah, it's important. It's interesting too. Yeah. And it's also Rabbi Gamliel, who was known as a temperamental character, but for a student, he doesn't lose his temper. So that becomes a value. That's the transition to the next set of stories now in the Talmud. So you see, it's a really interesting chapter. Remember the beginning of this chapter was about laws of Shabbos.
Right.
So it seems like that's far. We've definitely veered off the subject. By the way, we'll get back to it. But I don't even remember right now how we got on this. I really don't. I'd have to go back and figure it out. But because we were talking about the books of the Bible and how they were chosen. Anyway. So now we have a bunch of stories about Hillel and Shammai. Famous stories, although, it's actually very few people that know the stories have actually read the original. So we're going to read the original now. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. So we're in the top of 144. Le'olam Yehei Adam Anvatan Kehillel Va'al Yehei Kapdan Keshamai. Okay, so a person should always be now, nav is the Hebrew word, Anvatan. So I'll translate that now as humility, because that's how it refers to Moses in the Torah, the great anav, the great humble person. In context, it means something like patient. So patience comes from humility. Okay, think of a teacher being patient with the student. Well, that comes from humility, the idea that the student may have something to offer me. So I will always answer the student because I will not assume because I'm the teacher, I'm so arrogant that I can never learn something from the student. So that's the quality of Hillel as a teacher, as a human being. So that's what you should mimic. That's what you should aspire to. V'al yehei kapdan keshamai. And don't be, so the kapdan is like an impatient. Impatient, but also means sort of a strict, impatient, almost bordering on nasty person like Shammai. Okay? So that statement flows from the previous statement, and now they're going to give us some stories that show the personality of both. Masneh b'shnei b'nei Adam. There's a story of two people. Sheimru zeh zeh. They made a bet. They made a wager. Amru, they said, Kol mi she'elech v'yaknit et Hillel. Whoever can go and annoy Hillel. That's what the word yaknit means, annoy, but it means cause him to lose his temper. He told Arba Me'ed Zuz. We'll win 400 zuz. 400 zuz is a lot of money. Your average ketubah has 200 zuz, which is a yearly salary. Yeah, the yearly middle class salary. So they're betting twice a yearly salary that I could make Hillel lose his temper. And the other guy says, no way. You're not going to be able to do it. So they make the wager. Amar Chad Mehem. So one says, I'll be able to do it. I'll bet you 400 zuz that I'll be able to make Hillel lose his temper. Oto Hayom Erev Shabbat Haya. That day was Erev Shabbat, the eve of Sabbath, which is how the Talmud refers to Friday. So why? By the way, not Friday night, obviously. No, because
during the day.
During the day. Okay, yeah. So why is it important that it's Friday? Because it's before Shabbat. What you do on Friday is you get ready for Shabbat, especially in the afternoon. It seems to be taking place in the afternoon, shortly before Shabbat. The Hillel chafaf et rosho. Hillel, in our terms, I would say he was taking a shower. He was washing himself, getting ready for Shabbat. Okay, so it's very close to Shabbat. Halach ve'avara patach beito. He went and he stood at the entrance to his house, Amar, and he said, Mikan Hillel. Where's Hillel? So he knows it's Hillel's house, but he calls out Hillel, doesn't go in, but he's standing outside. Okay? Already annoying, right? All right, it's annoying because it's Friday. Everybody's getting ready for Shabbat. Hillel's taking a shower, and someone's at his door. Where's Hillel? Nit atef v'yatsa likrato. Wraps himself up, probably in a towel, and he goes and answers the door. Okay. Amarlo, b'ni ma tamivakesh. So Hillel, a very patient guy, says, my son, how can I help you? Ma tamivakesh. What are you looking for? But really, that's it. How can I help you? Amarlo, she'eyala yesh li lishol. He says, I have a question. Amarlo, sha'al b'ni. He said, answer, my son. Ask away, my son. Sha'al, ask. Mipnei rashahem shel bavliim segal galiot. So why is it that Babylonians have roundish heads? Segal is like a round head. Very important question. I'm interrupting your pre-Shabbat shower, and I need to know, why is it that Babylonians have roundish heads? Now, okay, so remember, Hillel doesn't know, but he knows. The point of the question is to get him to lose his temper.
Right.
Like, get out of here. Or even like, can't you ask me after Shabbat? Like, you have to interrupt what you know is my shower? Okay. Amar lo b'ni. So he says to him, my son, she'elah gedolah sha'alta. You've asked a great question. Doesn't respond, with anger, right? And Hillel doesn't know it's an intentionally offensive question, but he doesn't take it, he doesn't take offense at all, and he has an answer. Mipnei she'ein lahem achayot pikechot, because they don't have very smart midwives. So he says, it's up to the midwife to kind of get the head out. Right. So they have to kind of form the head, and they mess up, and they end up with these weird-looking heads. That's his answer. All right. All right. What I would not learn from this story is anything about Babylonians, anything about midwives, anything about the heads of babies. If you're going in that direction, I'm not going to say that's foolish. I'm happy to respond if you have questions about it. I will point out that's probably not the point of the story. The point of the story is Hillel does not lose his temper. Okay.
Believe it or not,
learn from
in Mesoamerica in ancient prehistory, the rulers would wrap the heads of newborn babies in their family so that they ended up with a pointed head.
Yeah.
And they would be distinctively identified as royalty.
Right. Okay. Well, that's something that Hillel could have answered if Hillel knew that.
Original cone head.
The cone head.
Original cone head.
Maybe that's where Cohen comes from.
Halach v'imtin sha'acha. Okay, so now he goes, because Hillel sends him on his way, gives him a satisfying answer. He waited an hour. So an hour, now Shabbat's really getting closer. Chazar v'amar, and he came back, and he said, Mikan Hillel? Calls out again. Where's Hillel? And at this point, that's annoying, because he knows Hillel is there. Mikan Hillel, says his wife, Nit atef. So Hillel's still in the shower, or whatever he's doing, the bath, because he wraps himself up in a towel.
It's in a spot.
Right. Well, it's his house. It's his house. The guy actually comes to his house too. So v'yatzah likrato, and he comes to greet him. Amarlo b'ni. He says, my son, ma tamivakesh. How can I help you? What do you want? Amarlo she'elah yesh li lishol. I have a question. Amarlo sha'al b'ni. Sha'al. He tells him, ask away, my son. Ask away. Couldn't be nicer. Mipnei ma einehem shel tarmidiin. Why are the eyes of the Tarmids trutot? Bleary. Why are their eyes always running? Okay? What? So ask him another. We know because we're following the narrator. It's an intentionally stupid question, sort of foolish question. How's Hillel supposed to know this? How does he even know this? What's and who cares? Yeah. But he answers them. Amar lo b'ni she'elah gedolah sha'alta. He says, my son, you've asked a great question. Again, this is Hillel. Mipnei shdarin ben acholot, because they live in sandy places. So the sand's always in their eyes. Right. So Hillel's just always saying, that's a great question. Always has an answer. Okay, he doesn't even say, I don't know. Or he doesn't say, why are you asking me? Okay. Halach v'imtin sha'achat. So he goes and he waits another hour. Chazar v'amar comes back. Mikan Hillel. Where's Hillel? Nita tefi yatzah likrato. Puts on a towel, goes out to greet him. Amar le b'ni ma tamivakesh. Always saying the same thing. My son, how can I help you? Amar lo she'elah yesh li lishol. I have a question. Amar lo sha'al b'ni sha'al. Says, ask away, ask. At this point, he understands. He's never going to be able to get the guy to lose his temper. Mipnei ma raglehem shel Afrikaim rechavot. How come African men have wide legs? Okay, same sort of question. Amar lo b'ni she'elah gedolah sha'alta. You've asked a great question. Mipnei shedarim ben bitzei hamayim. Because they live in marshes. Since they live in marshes, they have to take big steps. So they've got wide legs. Is he making this up? Does Hillel know this stuff? I don't know.
Well, here they actually say feet, not legs.
Feet,
so,
right?
Which
Feet.
makes more sense.
Right. You're right. Yeah, feet. Okay. So these have the taste of a folk tale.
Yeah.
And again, the stories are about Hillel's great patience, not necessarily about his great knowledge and his anthropological knowledge. He knows but he seems to have pretty good answers to these things. Maybe some of it is common sense too. Well, I assume it's because they live near sand and he's figuring it out. Yeah.
Actually, when I was in the when I was in the South American rainforest, the natives who always walk around barefoot have very wide, flat feet.
Yeah.
Because they're always walking around barefoot.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in the marshes.
Right. So Hillel's answering the guy where he's at, and he's giving him the answers that he wants, and he's using his common sense and some knowledge, and he comes up with decent answers. Okay. Now, we know, but Hillel doesn't know, the whole point of this was to irritate him. It's also happening right before Shabbat, when he knows he's going to be in the shower.
In a hurry.
Right. Amarlo, she'elot harbe yesh li yishol. He says, and I got lots of questions for you. You know what I'm saying? Now that I've got your attention, I've got lots of questions to add. But umit yarei ani shamatichos, but I'm a little bit afraid that I'll start to annoy you. Nita tef. Okay, so now he wraps himself up v'yashav lefanav. So he wraps himself up in his towel and he sits down next to him. Says, I've got all the time in the world. You are the most important thing for me right now. So you will never anger me. Let's ask all your questions. That's it. Amarlo, kol sheilot yesh lecha lishol sh'al. Any question you got my full attention. Listen, I mean, this is what's amazing about this, of course, is that Hillel is a celebrity rabbi at this point too. I mean, Hillel is the great rabbi of his generation and a leader of his generation. You show up at his house, a stranger with weird questions, and he's got time for you. And so the rabbis are admiring that.
He knew with whom he was dealing.
Who knew what he's doing?
I'm
not sure.
The second question was asked, I'm sure he knew.
Okay. Yeah. So it becomes kind of a competition. Yeah. That would be an interesting way of interpreting it. Hillel knew about the bet, and he was taking.
With whom he was dealing.
Yeah.
By the way,
I have. I mean, we have several, these stories, and we can talk about what's going on here. Really, what's going on, and is this really admirable behavior? I'd ask us as we're studying these stories, not just to admire Hillel, but to kind of wonder, to posit, like, is this really what you're supposed to do? I mean, is that really the best use of his time? Can everybody really be like Hillel? Is there something that's not admirable? Because we're going to also learn about Shammai, who would never have done this to anybody.
That's the first question. He would have said, get out of here.
Right. Well, we'll have examples of that. So, and how do you train yourself? Can you just go like that and say, okay, I'm going to be like Hillel right now? Does Hillel have a family? Where are Hillel's loyalties? If he has a family to take care of, can he really just stop everything? Does he have other responsibilities? These, I think, are real questions because the Talmud's not a foolish book. And I think it forces us to ask these questions. And that's why we have several pages of these stories. It's never simple. Yeah.
Didn't he have an entourage that kept people like that away from him?
He didn't. Other rabbis did. It's a good point because other rabbis would. Other rabbis you hear about assistants, even in the Bible. So Hillel doesn't seem to have even an assistant, which means that he wants the contact with the people, and he doesn't turn people away. Now, how efficient can you be? That's a question to ask too.
That's a very good question.
So it really is. I ponder these stories a lot because really every rabbi tries to be like Hillel, but how well, most rabbis, not every rabbi. Not every. Some rabbis will pick Shammai. Shammai wasn't. That's not such a bad role model. But clearly, the Talmud is telling us pick Hillel if you've got a choice. By the way, even in the prayer book says, Talmidov Shal Aharona Kohen. Who was be like Aaron, who was never angry, and that's something Hillel would say. That's Hillel's statement. Hillel's statement is be like the students of Aaron, because Aaron was never angry. That's your aspiration. All right, let's finish this. Whatever you question you've got, ask Amarlo. Atahu Hillel shekorinoncha nesi Yisrael. Are you the Hillel that they call a prince in Israel? Amarlo hen. And he says, yeah, that's me. That's me. I'm Hillel. Amarlo imatahu lo yirbu kmotcha b'Yisrael. If that's you, there should never be more like you in Israel. There shouldn't be any more people like you. So Amarlo b'ni, he says, my son. Keeping my son. Mipnei ma. He says, why? Why can't there be more people like me? Just curious. Not angry here. Curious. Amarlo, mipnei she'ibadati al yadcha 400 zuz. Because I lost 400 zuz because of you. So at this point, he gives it away. he gives it away. I had a bet that I could anger you, and that's why, because you made me lose 400 zuz. Amarlo, Heve Zahir Baruchacha. He said, you should watch out for your soul. He says, be careful about gambling. Baruchacha. That's how I'm interpreting this. Be careful for your soul. Because, that's... But I think he says it sort of gently chiding him. And then he goes on, Kidai hu Hillel shete'abed al yado arba me'od zuz. It's better that you should lose 400 zuz because of Hillel. V'Hillel lo yakpid. Than for me to lose my temper. It's better that you should lose the 400 zuz than for me to lose my temper. So that I should become someone who loses his temper. So, and that's the end. That's the end of the first story, series of stories. I'm going to start the next one because we have a few minutes. So page 145. No, these take place in Israel.
But it says here,
the beginning.
Oh, maybe. You're right. No, he was originally from Babylon. Yeah, the stories take place in Israel. Yeah, but he was born in Babylonia and he comes to Israel. Yeah, that's why he would know about the oval heads. I guess I don't know. There was back and forth between Israel and Babylonia anyway, so they were aware of Babylonians. All right. Tunu Rabbanan. Maseh, so this is a famous story. Famous story. I mean, it leads to a famous story. We'll just do the first part of it. Tunu Rabbanan. Maseh begoy echad. Sheba lifnei Shammai. A non-Jew. The word goy there, is not a insult. Right? It's not pejorative. It's how you refer to a non-Jew. A non-Jew comes to Shammai, Amarlo. Kama Torah yesh lachem. How many Torahs you guys got? Right? How many Torahs? Interesting question. Amarlo shtayim. He says 2. So what does it mean by 2? Torah shebichtav, v'Torah sheba'al peh. We have the written Torah, but we also have the oral Torah. All of our explanations. And already in the Talmud is part of the oral Torah, but in the Talmud, there's this concept of the oral Torah, the explanations, which is well developed, enough that it's equivalent. These are 2 Torahs that are equal in authority. The written Torah, which we chant, and the Tanakh, but also the oral Torah is our interpretation. That's how many we've got. That's Shammai. Amarlo, shebichtav ani mamincha. Okay, for your written Torah, I'll buy that. I could learn that. I can accept that. V'sheba'al peh eini mamincha. But the oral Torah, your explanations, I don't accept that. Why should I accept that? That's just this is his critique. It's interesting, a simple story, but always something sophisticated going on beneath the surface, which is that this is a critique of you all think that you can take the written Torah and come with creative interpretations that are often very far from the plain meaning of the text. And this guy's saying, I don't accept that. I need the written rule book. I've got the written rule book. I'll follow that. But why should I follow what he is saying? Right, your explanations. Maybe you're idiosyncratic. Who gives you the authority to make those explanations? That's why it's a deep critique. He's looking at Judaism and wondering, how do you guys get away with it? You've got the Torah, but you have all these explanations which are so far removed. All right, a little bit more. Giarani al manat shetelamdeni Torah shebichtav. I'll convert to Judaism, or actually it says, convert me in command form. Convert me on the condition that you just teach me. All I want you to teach me is the written Torah. I don't care about your explanations, the oral explanations. Ga'arbo v'hotzio ben Zifa. Rabban Gamliel got mad at him and kicked him out of his office. All right, next week we'll talk about it. What Hillel does. Yeah.